The great ship drifted in the silent ocean between stars, a sliver of polished metal and dormant light. Its name, to the few who knew of its mission, was the Cradle's Echo. Within its central chamber, held in a stasis field of humming blue, was the last of humanity. One final dreaming mind. On the world known as Viridia Prime, the consensus observed the approaching vessel. It was small, technologically crude, emitting simple friendship pulses in a dozen galactic languages. The consensus, a gestalt of the planet's floating crystalline flora, found it curious. They had observed the violent end of humanity's home system from a great distance, a brief and brutal stellar event that had erased a noisy, promising young species. This ship, they deduced, was a relic. A tomb, perhaps, a tendril of collective thought extended, gently capturing the Cradle's echo and drawing it into a stable orbit. With delicate psychic probes, they scanned the interior. One life form remained, its biological processes nearly halted. The consensus debated. Contact with ephemeral, solitary biologicals was rare. Their history was often one of conflict and consumption. Yet this one was alone, the last of its kind, sleeping in a metal shell. There was a certain poignancy to it. They decided to wake the human, not on their own verdant world, but within a constructed environment aboard their stellar research station. The luminous bow. The chamber they built was a facsimile of a human habitation, based on fragmented data from the ship's computers. It had flat floors, right angles, and a bed. To the consensus, it was a bleak and uncomfortable design, but they hoped it would provide comfort. They initiated the revival sequence. The human awoke. Its eyes, two deep pools of brown, opened. It drew a sudden, sharp breath. Its name was Eli. He sat up, his hands pressing into the soft, alien-made grass that the consensus had mistakenly thought suitable for flooring. He looked at the smooth, organic walls that pulsed with a gentle inner light, at the opening where a door should be, and he understood. He was not home. Home was gone. The consensus introduced themselves as a soft, telepathic voice in the stillness. We greet you. We are the consensus of Viridia Prime. We recovered your vessel. You are the last. We offer sanctuary. Eli listened. He stood, his movements slow, testing his revived limbs. He walked to the opening and looked out into a vast observatory. Below, the emerald swirl of Viridia filled the view. It was beautiful. It was not Earth. He felt the weight of his solitude then, a physical pressure on his chest. He gave a single, slow nod. Thank you, he said, his voice rough from disuse. Days passed. The consensus provided nutrition, water, and answered all questions. They showed him star maps, confirming what he already knew. Sol was a faint, cold notation. They were kind in their distant way. They found him fascinating. He was so solid, so singular. He did not merge or blend. He was a contained, quiet storm of memory and emotion. They offered him access to their cultural archives, to music made from wind through crystalline fronds, to poetry of shared light patterns. He observed, he learned. He was always polite. But a profound melancholy clung to him, a shadow that moved when he moved. The consensus, feeling his sorrow, sought to cheer him. They asked about human art. It is gone, Eli said softly, looking at the stars. Your ship's archives contain limited data. Could you recreate it? We wish to understand. Eli was silent for a long time. Then he asked, do you have paper? Or something like it? The consensus, intrigued, synthesized a material of great durability and a pleasing, faint texture. They provided it, along with containers of elemental carbon suspended in liquid adhesive close approximation of ink and paint. Eli began to draw. He drew a field of wheat under a yellow sun. He drew a mountain range at dawn, peaks tinged with pink. He drew a child's face, smiling with a missing tooth. Each image was rendered with startling precision and profound emotion. The consensus observed, their collective consciousness stirring with unfamiliar sensations. These were not simple recordings. They were memories, made manifest. They were love letters to a ghost. "We perceive deep attachment," the voice noted. "Your species bonded to specific geographies and individuals with remarkable intensity." "It was how we knew who we were," Eli replied, starting a new drawing. It was of an old man, hands gnarled, planting a seed in dark soil. The consensus watched him work. They began to notice something else. The human solitude was not a passive state. It was a forge. In his quiet acceptance, in his daily ritual of remembrance, there was a terrifying strength. He carried an entire world inside his mind, and he refused to let it fade. This was not the resilience of a colony or a hive. This was the resilience of a single fragile vessel holding an ocean. Cycle. A different kind of vessel approached the luminous bow. It was a ghast raider, a piratical species of spiked chitin and predatory instinct. They preyed on the weak, the isolated. They scanned the station, seeing its primary inhabitants as harmless plants. They detected one lone, warm-blooded life sign. Easy salvage. Easy prey. Alarms sang through the station, not in sound, but in pulses of anxious light. The consensus voice was calm, but urgent. "A hostile entity has breached the perimeter. They are drawn to your biological signature. We have no defensive capabilities. We are a research collective. We suggest you conceal yourself." Eli put down his drawing stylus. He looked at the half-finished portrait of a woman laughing, her hair blown by a sea breeze. He carefully set it aside. "Where are they?" he asked, his voice unchanged. The consensus guided him to a security visualization. 3 ghast were moving through the lower storage spire, their forms jagged and cruel. They were breaking, grabbing anything of apparent value. Eli walked to the storage locker that held his personal effects from the cradle's echo. He opened it. There was a jumpsuit, a data slate, and a small sealed case. He opened the case. Inside, nestled in foam, was a simple object of polished steel and worn wood. The consensus had scanned it, identified it as a primitive kinetic weapon, a pistol. It was deemed a relic, harmless compared to plasma casters. They had paid it no more mind than they would a stone axe. Eli loaded it with precision, each movement deliberate, practiced. He then walked to the station's environmental control terminal. He began to input commands, cross-referencing with station schematics the consensus provided. "What are you doing?" The consensus asked, puzzled. "Surviving," Eli said. He sealed the bulkheads in the lower spire, section by section. He manipulated the atmospheric pressure, creating subtle but confusing eddies. He triggered emergency lighting in sequences, creating strobing shadows. To the consensus, it seemed random, desperate. To the ghast, it was disorienting. Their advance slowed. Eli did not hide. He moved. He left the habitation chamber and entered the main body of the station, a vast garden space of floating crystalline platforms and soft, misty light. He stood in the open, waiting. The ghast found him. They clattered into the garden, their weaponry raised. They saw a lone, soft-skinned being, holding a tiny piece of metal. They emitted clicks of derision. The leader stepped forward, its voice a grating synthesization. "You, alone. Your things are ours now. You end." Eli looked at them, his expression not of fear, but of a deep, weary recognition. He had seen their light before, in essence. Bullies who took because they could, who saw solitude as weakness. "I am not alone," Eli said, his voice calm. Carrying in the still air. The ghast looked around, scanning. They detected only the faint, plant-based consciousness of the consensus. You are alone, it insisted. Eli raised the pistol, not at the lead ghast, but at a crystalline conduit high above, humming with energy. You misunderstand, he said. I carry my people with me. He fired. The shot was impossibly loud in the crystalline space. The conduit shattered, not with an explosion, but with a cascading chime. A specific frequency. The frequency Eli had learned from the archives, that certain viridian crystals used to signal extreme duress. The garden erupted. Every crystalline entity, every floating plant, every piece of the consensus present on the station reacted. It was not an attack. It was a reflexive, overwhelming surge of psychic distress, a scream of pure, shared terror. For the consensus, who had never known violence, the shock of the gunshot and the shattering scream of the crystal was a psychic detonation, the wave of raw, telepathic anguish hit the ghast like a physical blow. Their species was not psychically sensitive, but the force was so primal, so powerful, it overloaded their neural pathways. They stumbled, clawing at their heads, their weapons falling from numb grips. They fell to their knees, disoriented and in mental agony. Eli walked forward. He stood over the writhing leader. He did not fire again. He simply looked down, his face etched with the sorrow of a man who has seen world's end. Leave, he said, the word flat and final. Tell others this place is under protection. My protection. The ghast, broken by a pain they could not comprehend, fled. They stumbled back to their ship. A primal fear now etched into their minds. A fear of the Quiet One who carried an army of ghosts in his heart. Silence returned to the garden. The psychic scream faded to a hum, then to stillness. The consensus slowly recoalesced, their collective mind reeling from the shared experience. They focused on the human. He was standing where he had been, the pistol now held loosely at his side. He was looking at the shattered crystal on the floor, a look of profound regret on his face. I am sorry, he whispered. I had to frighten you, to frighten them. The consensus approached him, not with fear, but with a dawning, awe-struck realization. They had seen his memories as pretty pictures. They had seen his solitude as emptiness. They were wrong. His solitude was a monument. His memories were not just images. They were a code, a library, a blueprint of an entire civilization's spirit. And within that library were chapters on war, on strategy, on the terrible, focused will to survive. He had not used an advanced weapon. He had used their own nature and his own profound understanding of it as a tool. He had turned a scream into a shield. The voice, when it came, was different. Softer, filled with a new respect. You defended us. You who have lost everything. Eli knelt, gently gathering the larger fragments of the shattered crystal. I have lost my world, he said, his voice thick. But that does not mean I have lost my duty to be kind, or to protect those who are kind to me. He looked up at the shimmering air, meeting the gaze of a billion linked minds. You gave me a place to remember. That is a gift beyond measure. A gift worth fighting for. The consensus understood then. Humanity's might was not in its warships, which were dust. It was not in its cities, which were ash. It was in this, the unyielding heart of a single survivor, the courage to remember in the face of oblivion, the strength to build a hearth from grief, and the ferocity to defend that hearth with the echoes of a lost world. It was the stunning, terrifying, beautiful truth that a human alone was never truly alone. They carried with them the weight and the wonder of all who had come before. And in the quiet garden of an alien station, under the light of an alien sun, the last human began to draw again. This time, he drew the consensus, a beautiful, shimmering network of light and thought. He was adding a new chapter to the library he carried, a chapter on friendship found, not in the ashes of home, but in the silent, star-dusted dark between.